So hi, hello everybody, I'm Nick Croudace and I'm from Infineon Technologies. So hopefully you have heard of Infineon or you know Infineon. We make semiconductors, so we make the jam inside of your cake with all your software, your PKIs and everything else. So we deliver hardware that addresses many, many platforms. I would like to thank PrimeKey, A, for inviting us, and B, for working with us on our advanced drones. We're using a drone for a use case, and as we can show you through this, we can see why a drone's really important. I'm marketing, so I have to apologize beforehand for boring you. So what we look at is the IoT world and the many applications that we have here. What we see is massive opportunities in the IoT sphere, and also many, many challenges because these things will think for themselves, these things will want to be updated, and most importantly, these things will always talk to a cloud or a telecoms infrastructure. So what we always see is the new business opportunities and the new business models that come out of the IoT world. We also see many, many new products, new ideas, and new ways of doing these things. And also, unfortunately, every time we do security, somebody else has got an idea how to break it. Usually either to get your data or getting access into an infrastructure and cause harm. And then also we look at the traditional world and what the digital infrastructure is going to do to that world and how it can be readdressed. So altogether, this is why we have our digital security products, and this is why Infineon are spending a lot of money and a lot of investment to make sure that we keep going forward. But you would have seen in your news, and you would have seen quite a few things like this. Inside the drone right now, they've realized that the drone can actually do quite a lot of harm. So you would have heard that you've got Frankfurt and Heathrow that have started to be shut down. Heathrow was closed down for 5 days just because drone was in its airspace. Again, really critical thing because every country will have its own secured airspace. Every country will have its own keys, and every country will have its own geo-mapping that needs to be protected. Just this week, we had obviously the Audi oil problem where they used a drone to actually make explosives. So they strapped an IED to a drone, flew it over the oil foundry and the oil pipelines, and basically did a lot of harm. This is why IoT security, and with your help, with the infrastructure, the mapping, the OS, the PKI infrastructure, this is what we're trying to stop. And also you'll see this actually going forward to the application area, but also the consumer area. So again, marketing rubbish, sorry. So what we see in terms of the infrastructure, what we have now within the drone market, we have an infrastructure mapping process, which could be anything from mapping your roads, traffic incidents, mining, land surveying, geo-mapping, including border defense, is being done by drones. We see in agriculture, drones are actually being used heavily now in agriculture. So not just looking at crops, but also mapping your cattle and what's going on with your cycling and everything else that's taken care of inside the farm. Inspection and monitoring, we're seeing a massive explosion here. So instead of having 6 or 7 safety engineers that go out and look at your bridges or your pipeline or anything like this, it takes 4 hours for the drone to fly over. You get high-definition pictures, you can see what's going on, and you can do your predictive maintenance. And last but not least, the emergency responses. Every country now has drones that is linked to your emergency services. Either this is planning for incident or accident management, or actually just doing fencing in sport arenas and things like this, where they actually look where people go, mapping how they get there, and putting police in place to actually to move you away from that area. So, PKI in action. For us in the drone, or what I should say, multicopter, because some countries get really paranoid because they think a drone's a military thing. But what we're looking at here is safe skies. Safe skies means when the drone is actually out there, you'll have multiple certificates and multiple PKIs. Not just for the operator's certificate and license, but as I said, you're going to have certificates and PKI keys to do geo-mapping to make sure it's flying where it should be. If it's going into a sensitive area, does it have the right to be there? And if it does it also have the right keys to actually allow that flight path? So on the left, obviously the airport news that you just shown. Hardware stops this taking place because it'll look, do I have the right certificate? Do I have the right keys? If not, I will force a landing. And the nice bit now with the security and with the software together, the nice policeman will pick up the drone and say, this is yours, sir. Can you please come with me? Because your digital fingerprint, your certificate, and your flight path and your management is stored within the device. And then when we look at some special permits in wind farms, solar farms, usually some sensitive areas, oil foundries and things like this, as we said before, the drone will have a map and keys that will allow it to go into that site, but it will also have a mapped predicted route where it can actually go and inspect. When you look at wind farms, for instance, they're not just looking at the blades, the turbines, and doing some predictive maintenance, but they're also looking at what's going on behind the drones, the wind farm, because you have this thing called scorched earth, where when the wind turbines are going around, if it's owned by the farmers, what happens is that the grass gets scorched. So they're managing that as well. So within Infineon, we have our Optega family, which is part of our security solutions. We actually generate the silicon, and from the silicon, we'll insert the first security certificates and keys. This is what we call secure at birth. So we give birth to our little baby boy or baby girl, which could actually be a security IC, or it could be an eSIM. From there, it'll go to the OEM or the customers, and from there, they can actually insert their own certificate keys and their own PKI infrastructure, and they can actually marry it with PrimeKey there and then, because our hardware is developed and ready to go. We've enhanced our APIs, which means that when we're doing PKIs and certificates, we're ready to actually marry straight into the PrimeKey servers. So again, we're looking at our hardware and how we can improve it and how we can deliver a better service. And then the customer himself, for the drone story, he would actually go onto the cloud, download his own personal certificate to say, I now own this drone, and I wish to fly in this country. So in operation, the devices would communicate via cellular technology, if it's the eSIM, for instance, where it talks to the different MNOs, and it can fly in the different areas. Or within the Optega solution, we have TLS embedded. So this means that you'll have direct cloud connectivity ready to go. So really what we're talking about here is a 360 solution of making sure we have the advanced hardware and the security hardware, but securing your keys, making sure you have the correct infrastructure, your certificates are all correct, and you're safe to fly. As it was said yesterday when they were talking about airplane engines, where you have so many certificates that all have to be validated before you fly, this is what you'll have in your drones. Exactly the same. So some of the building blocks we have within our Optega solutions, you have all the standard hardware architecture that you would expect. As I said, this is a turnkey solution, so we would put the certificates and the PKIs at the front end, but we also have the capability of downloading from the cloud all you need. And again, the standard building blocks, your authentication, secure updates, and everything you can think of. Just looking at the product itself, we have at the moment the Trust M. The Trust M is one of our latest security solutions. Again, it's a turnkey solution, so tell us what you need. At the front end, we will do it. Tell us how you want to communicate in the cloud, and we have PrimeKey to support. As I said, our APIs have all been done, so we're ready to connect to the servers and download what you need. The other nice thing here is the TLS and everything else is taken care of, and it's a quite multi-purpose solution. This is a 3mm squared package. So again, it just fits into your solutions nice and small, doesn't take any massive real estate, or it doesn't take any real mapping that you need to take in terms of your MCU performance and everything else, because we take care of everything in the solution. All you have to do is give the host code to your MCU or your ASIC or whatever, and it will communicate very nicely to our solution. The other thing that we've just launched is our eSIM, and our eSIMs are ready. We have a lot of experience now with the MNOs. So again, if you're doing cellular technology, or in the case of the drone, we carry both, because you never know if you're going to have secure cloud connectivity. Sometimes you want to default to your cellular technology. So you'll see exactly the same standard of product from ourselves. And again, this product is ready and able to be used with any PrimeKey server and any cloud infrastructure, and the MNOs are ready to work. So I went very, very fast. Gives you more time. But basically, all we're saying here is we provide very strong hardware that meets the latest standards. It's turnkey, which means, again, we provide everything you need. Everything is on a lovely, lovely server within Infineon. But if you don't want to go to Infineon.com, you can go to GitHub, and you can download notes. We have an engineering forum where they exchange ideas or exchange what they do. And all the documentation is on GitHub, including software, so please have a look. But with our partnership with PrimeKey, we're going to go forward, because not just the drone that we talk about, but also what's going to happen here in the infrastructure. So most drones that are going to be industrial or a service drone will have the capability of wireless charging. This means the batteries have to carry their own identification and the standard to the Wireless Power Consortium. But this means that the batteries and the infrastructure and the charger also has to carry its own certificates and have to be married with PKI infrastructure. So it's a really good application. When we talk to some of the higher industrial guys who are looking at camera infrastructure, face recognition, mapping, all this nice stuff, before they fit it to the drone, they want these devices to carry PKIs that are married with the drone. That says, I validate your authorization, and I will say you can match with my infrastructure. This is why we work with PrimeKey, because this is something that's going to be really important going forward. The world's #1 drone manufacturer at the moment is looking at a complete ecosystem where everything that touches the drone has to carry the right credentials. Lastly, I went very, very fast. But we also have white papers, and again, we've done this in partnership with PrimeKey. It's just a brief introduction of the drone environment and how PKI will work in this environment. It's available to download, but if you need any information, help, or if you just want a guide, you can kick myself. My details are up there. Or you can Marlin, who has supported us very, very well with everything that's going on. So again, all we're doing here is providing the jam. So we're giving you the hardware to go to market with. We make sure it's ready and it's capable to go to any cloud-based or any cellular technology. And we know, because we've worked in unity with PrimeKey, that the APIs are ready for this device to take whatever you want to do. So I can now pass over. Sorry for going so fast, but I'm English, so I'm fast.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Yep, I think we'll find it. So thanks very much, Nick. That was the application. Running a PKI without an application is not much use. Having a PKI but not being able to manage it is also a difficult task. So I'm here to talk about managed PKI. All the use cases that Nick's been talking about so far are outside. So we're running a joint proof of concept running on a system ready for managed PKI. My name's Blundell. I'm from NTT. In case you don't know NTT, NTT, Nippon Telephone and Telegraphy, is bringing together 28 leading companies from around the world under one common brand, under one common model. So we have companies like Dimension Data, where I'm from, NTT Communications, NTT Security, my colleagues are here in the audience as well, plus 20 plus other companies who will be known as NTT from the 1st of October. By doing that, we are positioned to make an even bigger difference. So we plan to be one of the top 10 services and ICT services companies in the world, with over 11 billion in revenue by 2026. We're joined by 40,000 professionals around the world in 52 countries, so get ready for NTT. Hello, we are ready for you. So talking about managed PKI, what are we doing in the managed space? We have an overall framework where we talk about managing services and implementing services. So taking consulting, taking technical services, taking support services, providing the infrastructure to run it on, the hosting, the networking, and managing and providing support services for any kind of infrastructure. And when we map that to PKI, then we have PKI consulting services that we can provide from NTT, delivering new outcomes such as concepts and solutions. We can talk about technical services for PKI integration, verification, and testing, and then bring it down to anything from a support services to give you things like monitoring, incident management, and a service level agreement for your support. Also providing the infrastructure, for example, the data center hosting facilities, the colocation that you might need, any security that needs to go in the front end, and application delivery such as load balancers. And round that off with PKI managed services, so taking the full operational responsibility for your bespoke PKI solution. Naturally, all of this is secure by design. So when we talk about managed services, I get the request, oh, we need a managed service. And I go, well, what do you need? Are you talking about support? Are you talking about taking full ownership of the solution, or are we even talking about IT outsourcing, where I even take on, or NTT would take on the personnel responsible for operating this? So we have a number of solution models where we can say, okay, we can provide you a managed service, but simply for hosting the solution itself. So at the operations end, our clients are still responsible for the overall operations management. And we, from NTT, provide, let's say, the facilities to host and house the solution, so a rack, some infrastructure in there, so the routing, the switching, the internet connection that we can provide and manage for you. Of course, running a customer-owned application service on there, and rounding it off with some support services. So, for example, if there's a break for example, in the PKI appliance, then we can replace that and fix that within a certain SLA, or provide the spare parts. That's the simplest solution just for hosting. If we take that on and say, we'll add on to that, then adding into this toolbox, we can bring in additional security services and say, okay, this might be hosted on the public internet, so we need firewall, we might need intrusion protection, DDoS protection, load balancing is in there, and also the nuts and bolts of the networking, so the routing, the switching, and also the internet uplink. All delivered by NTT and hosted in an NTT data center anywhere in the world where we have a facility. Of course, the support services that we provide in there are the same as before, with incident management, with service level agreements, and an RMA to get spares on site as requested. Now, this is the operations up till now is still the responsibility of you, of the client, of the end user. So we haven't taken any operational responsibility so far. When we take on the next module, which is monitoring and event availability management, then we can, let's say, provide more services to show that the PKI is up and running. We're monitoring the availability 24/7, so it's not just waiting for a ticket to come from somebody who's monitoring the application. We will recognize that the application has failed. This ties nicely into Lutz's presentation, so we're using SNMP v3 for that. This is the PKI appliance. I don't think we've got IPv6 up in our own environment yet, but we are certainly ready to do that in other environments. So this is where all the nuts and bolts that we've been tying on to the PKI appliance come into play with SNMP v3 already been tested. Now, to tidy it off, we can also do fully managed PKI. And when I'm talking about fully managed, I'm talking about taking the full stack of what we call ITIL capabilities and responsibilities. So dimension data and NTT, we operate under ITIL v3. So all the terminology you see up here, for example, incident management, event management, capacity and performance monitoring, security, change and access management, and things like request fulfillment for changes, that's all ITIL. So when we talk about this, there's a defined responsibility, and we will work with you to create a RACI, a matrix of responsibilities, accountabilities, consulting and informative actions to define who is responsible for each process and outcome. Of course, we're still running in the same environment. We're still running in an entity data center. We're still running a PKI solution from PrimeKey or a sign server, for example. Of course, this bespoke element here is the PKI operations. So the provisioning, the application configuration, and also things like revocation. That's still to a certain amount under the responsibility of the PKI owner. Because at the end, we're running the infrastructure to facilitate and enable your use cases running on PKI. So there is always an interface there, and we need to make sure that that runs, and we have full availability set into both the architecture from the outset, but also the way we operate and manage this throughout the life cycle of the CA. Now we have a number of PKI availability models that we can offer. So basically anything that PrimeKey and EJBCA or Sign Server can provide from a high availability standpoint, depending on it being a CA, an RA, or a VA, there might be a need for a single node starting off with, or a cluster with 2 or 3 nodes, or we might just have 2 or 3 standalone nodes, or any combination of that. So basically, that's down to design. That's not something that we prescribe from the managed service. We are able to essentially manage each node, each box here, or a cluster of nodes individually or as a full environment. Adding on things like load balancing, firewall security, geo-redundancy if required. So copying this and doing a copy and paste to multiple locations around the world. Nice to see that we've got good features coming out here again to enable this to happen from an appliance level. So one of the things we found when we were looking at finding a blueprint for this was that we were faced with certain availability issues for dual homing an appliance to more than one switch. So it's nice to see that that's being addressed on the roadmap. Certainly makes things easier for us from an operations perspective, where we don't need to say run 3 switches, so now we can run 2 switches. So that makes it a little easier. Now, if we have to invest in this hardware, there are certain, well, let's say capital expenditure models which might not allow a business case to work out. So we are able to share infrastructure. And sharing infrastructure means that we have a common underlay, which is multi-tenanted, segregated at the network level, but virtualized, and that we can deliver PKI services from multiple appliances, which we manage on behalf of different customers under one infrastructure. Again, we have all the security built into that already, so there's firewall, there's IPS, DDoS mitigation, and load balancing already in that stack, and we would build that and operate that for multiple users which share this underlying housing, hosting, and infrastructure services. But everybody with their own HSM, everybody with their own PKI appliance. Taking that model forward, we are able to give a fully shared or multi-tenant model so that we can provide tenants on a PKI appliance and let's say segment the system at the virtual level to create, let's say, a more financially attractive model depending on what the use case is. Maybe a need just to start off this, or this might be working in a pre-production or a test environment where we don't need the full hardware stack and things like that. So again, flexibility is built in there. Of course, when it comes to SLAs, we're providing SLAs on the hardware. So if this hardware fails, then we need to find out, is there a way that this failure has been mitigated in the architecture, or do we need to address that via an SLA? So have, for example, an engineer and a spare to site within time X. Now, this is not something that we've built on slides. This is how we actually run our own proof of concept environment at NTT. And I'd like to invite you to our innovation lab in Frankfurt. The NTT Innovation Lab is co-located as a dedicated facility within what is known as eShelter Frankfurt 1 today. So it's not just a data center. Come and visit us. It's ideal to showcase the full solution. We talked about virtualization previously. The one thing the virtualization can't do is you can't touch it. This is the place where you can come and touch things, where you can see that it actually physically exists and what the underlying infrastructure is like. Now, you might not always need that, but that certainly creates a lot of trust in the conversations that we've had so far. And so the Innovation Lab is open for PKI and much, much more. Again, located in Frankfurt in Germany, and we're very, very happy to have NTT and our partners here showcasing and proving that our concepts actually work. So what are we doing here? Just to give you an idea, it's not just a simple rack with a switch. So we do have a full compute network security and also load testing environment built into the proof of concept. So depending on what your proof of concept is, what concept you'd like to demonstrate, we can prove it at scale, because we're running, for example, we're running PKI appliances here. We can run compute jobs. We have high bandwidth connections to NTT's Tier 1 network available around the world. And for example, if we're generating traffic of some kind, then we can fire up a load generator and get some actual traffic into your applications. So happy to talk about that and how your use cases might work here. Some of the use cases that we're doing today, of course, we have drones, we've got multicopters. The demo you see outside is running on this proof of concept environment, but we're also talking about proofs of concepts for TLS encryption and decryption. We're talking about IIoT, of course. We've been doing 3G, 4G, and 5G PKI and for mobile networks for a number of years. That's also up and running in our innovation lab, and of course load testing. Any number of use cases is available, and we're happy to host those use cases to show that whatever infrastructure you're tying up to PrimeKey will work in such an environment. So happy, so bring your own POC. Just to give you a little closer view, what do we have in there from PrimeKey? So we've got 2 appliances today running on running either EJBCA or Sign Server. The full infrastructure stack that we've shown you is also available in the Innovation Lab, so we can create the full stack. We've already got a couple of PKI use cases prepared, and yeah, it's a shame to see that infrastructure just run and create dead heat. So we're always interested in actually putting it into use. Now, taking it in from lab to production, so we have a holistic view when it comes to going from, let's say, a proof of concept into a lab environment to the production. Because we've built our proof of concept environment under the same rules or under the same architecture, under the same blueprint that we have for a managed service, makes it very easy to go from a POC stage at the NTT Innovation Lab and demonstrate all the other operating measures like backup and restore, like scaling up, like getting applications and adaptations up and running, that we can transform that into using NTT solutions and services into basically your professional solution. So not just a lab, not just a mock-up, but anything that can be hosted either off-prem, on-prem, in a colo or in the cloud, and having a full managed model underneath. So having the infrastructure in there, having the security, the load balancing, any kind of services that you'd like to run on top of that, the monitoring and full operations responsibilities. Just on a word of security, and we've heard a lot about FIPS today and the inbox security, but we are operating in IT environments. So NTT and eShelter data centers, that's where we keep data safe and sound. And so it goes without saying that, of course, this environment is fully audited, and all certifications that we need to manage any local, national, or international standards, starting at PCI DSS standards, ISO 9001, ISO 27001 for hosting, and up to any kind of national standards, all taken care of. So the standard for NTT data centers. So calling anybody for a POC and anybody who needs a managed service for PKI, happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you.